So good. So yeah, welcome and thanks for having me. I will speak tonight for what you see is faster than what you get and ways to speed up the perception. We changed a little bit the order of the presentations, but yeah, hopefully it will be fine for everyone. But first, let me introduce myself. My name is Radimir Bitsov, and I'm a front-end developer who loves to speak about performance, accessibility, and interface animations. You can find me with this username on all these things. And if you have any questions, yeah, please let me know on Twitter. I'm pretty active there. So I will start with the presentation with a quote. And because this presentation is about time and how we're perceiving time, I just want to note that how funny time can be. And we know for sure that time is an objective quantity and we can measure it very precisely. We can even have fun with time, as these guys here created some crazy animations and products by displaying time with different clocks, for example. And we know the importance of measuring page load time in terms of web performance. And our performance budgets are primarily based on this factor. And we're really focused actually on the objective part of time. And most of the cases when we have a request for improving improving the page speed and the page loading time, we're focusing on this factor, and which is absolutely fine. And it's really important, but probably we're forgetting something, and that's because time perception is a subjective topic. And to illustrate that, I want to use this so-called Kappa effect, which displays the consideration with the journey made in two parts that equals time. As you can see here, where our starting point is from house, we're taking a train, 500 kilometers for 3 hours, mid-destination, and from that point we're taking an airplane, flying for 3 hours, but 800 kilometers. Seems that, and some studies shows that the perception is we spend more time on the second case, which is an interesting topic. And recently we did steps in the right direction of measuring the impact of this subjective part of time. And we consider time to interact, first contentful paint, and about the fold time as well. We also have really nice tools to measure that. Web page test, for example, White House for the web for the recent application that we can build with performance optimizations. And also we can check that with the browser developer tools. And we can find even more on perf tooling today, which is an open source project that I'm happy to contribute as well. But the important part is to ask the question, how fast users think our website and our applications are at the end? Because it's all about the experience. And we as a developer need to understand the impact and the importance of that feature of our applications. So let's make our users happy. First of all, I would like to explain why perceived performance matters. Second will be how humans sense time, how we're sensing time, how we're perceiving time. And finally, I will spend some time explaining the most popular techniques that we can use to speed up the perception. So let's start with why actually perceived performance matters at the end. We can see some really nice examples with the recent published Twitter White application. And as you can see, they stated that it's interactive in less than 5 seconds over 3G, which is incredible for most devices, and with an average load time reduced by over 30%. And they did that because it's a progressive web app, and they did a lot of improvements in terms of perception of time and how fast and how quickly their application is at the end for the end users. I mean, to start using it. Which means that this definitely influenced the perception of our brand. It influences, another example actually of this influencing of the brand is housing.com. They increased the conversion by 38% and sped up page load by 30%, while in the same time, they lower the bounce rate by 40%. Again, it's a progressive web app built with the sense of how fast their application will be and will be ready for the users to use it at the end. But perceived performance affects also, and it's important as well, for the purchase intent of the users. Some other studies show that 5 milliseconds of delay resulted in increasement of 26% in users' frustration, while in the same time dropping 8% of the engagement. And this is just 5 milliseconds. Another example is that slow websites, part of the study, is that slow websites dramatically reduce the measured emotional aspect for purchase intent from our users. And it's also affect the brand functionality at the end. As famously Ilya Grigorik said, and defined in this function, that the perceived performance is correlated with expected performance, which is what actually our users think our websites are, how fast actually websites and web applications loaded for our users. The user experience and the actual performance. The actual performance is exactly the perceived performance. And we know that for the expected performance, we can do the optimization in terms of perceived performance. The actual performance is all the technical aspect that we're doing as web performance optimizations. And UX is actually the glue between those two. And it's, in my opinion, it's a responsibility for everyone in the team. It's for designers, developers, and even business owners. And the main part is that we need to think like our users. And perceived performance is our chance to optimize our websites by thinking like them. So next, how people perceive time. And to describe that, I will use a neuroscientific theory, which is called the internal clock model. And it shows how our time perception depends on our memory associated with a certain stimulus. In this diagram here, you can see that we're starting with a certain stimulus. It doesn't matter whether it's audio or visual stimulus or any other type. Then we have the pacemaker, which is the time processor. On the second stage, neurons transmit that information in our brains, and actually our brains start accumulating and looking for associated memories with this stimulus. At the final stage, which is the decision-making stage, we're spending that time. We're spending the time that actually our brain is associated. We're finding that our brain is trying to find certain memories. So it seems that the time of decision-making shortens considerably if we have a memory connected with a received stimulus. And why I'm describing this so much from scientific point of view is that our brains manipulate the perceived duration all the time for us. And what is perceived duration? It's the perceived time interval between two successive events, which is really interesting point, because with the next example called chronostasis, we can see how our brain manipulates our perception. For example, here, if we focus on the second hand, the moving hand, and just focus for a couple of seconds, and then focus on something else, so just move our vision outside of the focus area here, and then go back, we can sense for a fraction of a second how this clock seems that it stopped, just like an illusion. And this is a really interesting fact of an interesting argument of how our brain manipulates perceived time. And another interesting fact about that is that we're losing for about 40 minutes every single day because of this eye movement, because of the movement of our eyes, because we're losing fractions of seconds all the time. And this is because of that, because of our brain trying to manipulate this perceived time. So let's connect those two things. So what we know about perceived duration and web performance. A lot of studies shows that an instant action is between 0.1 and 0.2 seconds. And that's the acceptable response, a time in which certain stimulus affect our perception for instant behavior. From 0.5 to 1 second, we're sensing that as an immediate behavior, which is usually the response time in human-to-human conversation. Delays in this interval are noticeable, but still easily tolerated by the users. During this time, the user must receive a response from their action, from their command. Whether this will be like clicking a button or activating something on our application, they should receive some visual feedback. Between 2 and 5 seconds, that's the optimal experience where we are focused, we are concentrate. But if we didn't receive any visual feedback during this time, then we'll start losing perception of user flow. Between 5 and 10 seconds, which is the final part of this graph, it's all called the attention span. And this is the moment when we're losing any sense of what this task was about and what is the next step in the process, and so on and so forth. So this is the final part, is where that's the critical part, where we can definitely lose some users there and lose the engagement of our application, our website. To put it in another perspective, between 0.1 second and 1 second, we're happy. Between 1 second and 3 seconds, users feel neutral. And from 3 seconds to 8 seconds, we're just losing them. So that's, and just to note here that this is the user expectation to get a feedback from a certain action. It's not about only loading a page or how fast actually we're loading our application. This is a perception of all the actions that are on our applications and websites. Another interesting article that I found.
Can it be too fast?
Yes, it definitely can be too fast. And actually with this, that's a good point, because with this right here, this is an interesting article from Alan Pike, which is a former software engineer at Apple. And he stated that to provide a joy at 60 frames per second, we need to keep it like around 16 milliseconds. That's the perception of a smooth experience. And that's the goal for our animation effects. 100 milliseconds, it's not perfect for animations, but it's still good for feedback. And 1 second is where users sense the delay. And they're not frustrated, still not frustrated, but if there is, only if there is no visual feedback, if there is a visual feedback actually. And above 1 second, joy is lost and users are losing their feeling for task flow. So to answer your question, yes, it can be really fast. And there are certain studies showing the different aspects of how fast we can be and how slow we can afford to be with our actions. And just to prove that argument even more, the Weber-Fechner law is about the human perception for just noticeable difference. And more specifically, the relation between the actual change in a physical stimulus and the perceived change. And Stephen So even went further and defined this 20% rule, which visualized the idea of that in order for user to see any difference, it has to be changed by a minimum of 20%. And this includes all type of stimulus, visual, again, hearing, taste, everything. This is, for example, if we have two white bulbs, and in order to see any difference in the brightness, it should be at least one of the bulbs should be at least 20% brighter. That's the idea here. So how we can apply this rule for our perceived performance optimizations? I believe we should aim for 30% and go beyond this threshold of 20%, which means that if we have an action which takes around 3 seconds, for example, we need to make it 0.9, at least 1 second faster in order for our user to notice any difference, to notice any improvement. And of course, we can combine this rule with comparison to our competitors, and define what will be possible for our team to achieve at the end and what will be too expensive maybe, or too much at the end. So next, I want to cover some ways and some techniques how we can speed up that perception. And recently I published a poll on my Twitter feed where I asked what is the favorite technique for improving the perceived performance that developers use these days. Because we know from the history that we're using a wall of progress indicators and spinners and wallers and those type of visual indicators. But it seems that people are going more into these optimistic actions, and I'll explain a little bit in a second what actually optimistic action means. But also we have this progressive image rendering, skeleton screens, and progress indicators in the last place. Of course, there are not so many people voted for that poll, but still, for me, it's a nice indication what people are interested in. So what are these optimistic updates, optimistic actions that we can do? These are invisible background options that happen behind the scene, something that user cannot see, or something that we can prepare in advance. So we're trying to see what they're trying to achieve at the end, what's the final goal of the user flow, and then try to predict that and make it faster, make it feel way faster than actually it is. So to visualize this with an example, this is a background operation that Instagram is doing on their application, and seems that they're starting uploading a picture as soon as we are ready with our choice. So as soon as we know which picture we want to upload, they already prepare that for us. And as soon as we press the share button, this action will be, the feeling of this action will be instant for us. It will be around this time of 0.1, 0.2 seconds, which is great. Another example from their app is registering the like action during the loading. So even if your feed on your Instagram app is still loading, I can still press the like button. It will be registered, which is a really nice experience in terms of perceived performance. Next are skeleton screens. And in 2013, Luke Rulowski discussed the drawback of using wallers and spinners, and actually using these abstract elements on our web pages. And he spoke in favor of using thing that he called it back then skeleton screens. And I found that Apple actually used this approach in their iOS human interface guidelines, and they call it launch screen, although skeleton screens, I believe it's way more popular as a term. And they introduced that as an example of their iOS Safari application. So this is the launch screen before the user accesses the Safari application. And then next, they suggest providing the first screen, which replaces the content of this skeleton. So we have the placeholder on the address bar, we have the placeholder for the content, and then all the buttons, the actionable area is placed on the bottom. Still a placeholder, and this is the real representation of the screen at the end. And of course, the idea here is to improve the perception of how fast our applications are loading and ready to be used. And to demonstrate an even better way to demonstrate that is using this visual comparison performed by Tandem 7. And as you can see, clearly the one on the left-hand side is way faster in terms of perception and time perception. Also, these guys use incrementally constructed user interface. So users can even interact with the first tiles, the first articles in this newsfeed, even before the last one is loaded, which is really cool. The next thing is the progressive image loading. And I would like just to note that this is not the progressive JPEG file format. This is a technique where we can use multiple images or linear gradients in CSS to provide perception of something that is coming as a content, as an image asset in this case. And Medium is using multiple images in that in this example, visualizing that in this example, and they load first the a blurred version of the original image using any type of design application like Photoshop, for example, and then after a certain amount of time, when the image is ready to be served, you can see it there. This example has been recorded on 3G mobile network, so in order just to visualize better this this technique. But Harry Roberts suggested that we could use linear gradients as well, and that's another technique. And I did some research around certain tools that we can use to automate this process. There is an online application called Color Extractor that will give us the common colors in our image asset, and then we can construct and actually this tool is constructing the linear gradient ready for use, ready to be used immediately, and we can use this together with the background image, which will be replaced after it's ready to be loaded. There is also an NPM package called Get Image Colors, and for post CSS I found actually Resemble Image, which is a really nice package as well, NPM package as well. So to visualize the effect of this linear gradient, this is on a 3G again, loading this linear gradient. I'm not sure how good you can see the difference, but it serves the purpose for having a placeholder on our image asset and then the original image. And on the last place in my poll were the progress indicators. And I know that this is not the most interesting and the most exciting technique that we can use to increase the perceived performance, but it's something that it defines something really important. And this is our chance to give users certainty. And this certainty means give them a feedback that something is going to happen, that there is a progress, and that this is a part of the user flow, and they can expect a final result out of that. For example, if we combine the progress indicators with text labels, like saying how many percent is the progress, or saying 1 out of 5, 2 out of 5, or something like that, we can give even more information than just a loading animation. And some studies stated that if we use band animations on the opposite position, opposite to the progress indicator, the progress animation, the progress bar, sorry, this will increase the perception of loading by 12%, which is interesting effect. And to prove that as an argument, you can imagine two trains passing each other and the perception of us being in one of the trains, how fast actually is the opposite one. But what about spinners and loaders? This is a really interesting topic because they're one of the favorite components that can express our that we can play around with that technique very easily. They're really accessible, and we can easily create them, easily share, and yeah, people are doing crazy things with spinners and loaders. But I believe we should avoid them as a single indicator. And what do I mean by that is, I believe still it's fine if we press, for example, a button to use a spinner if you want to visualize certain progress, but just for a fraction of a second or certain amount of time. But we should avoid using them as just a single indicator of progress. And the reason why is that they draw attention to the fact that user is waiting, and there is no other indication. There is no other indication for what's going on behind the scene. One of my favorite techniques is actually interface animation. And animations can affect the perception of time and duration on our website's visitors a lot. I mean, that's a really powerful technique. Of course, there is a big note here that we can overdo animations, and we can even do more harm than actually create a better effect and perception in our applications by doing animations, so definitely we should be careful. But it's a really pleasant for the eye, and it feels like a fluid process. So like a user flow that people can easily follow. To visualize another example using animations is by moving objects. We can predict a little bit where is the direction of users and how they're moving their eyes on following certain objects on the screen. And we can provide them with the information according to that. And this is an example built by Val Het, and I definitely recommend follow her because she's doing some amazing things with animations, and she's a great expert in that area. Another interesting technique is content shifting user experience. Again, this is similar to the first animation that I showed, and it's again part of this fluid process that feels intuitive for the user. And we should, and this is actually a really complex scenario here. So it's something that we should be really careful how we are implementing and how much time and resources we're spending. But if it's something really important for us and for our brand, definitely we should invest time, because this can be implemented in a very elegant way, and can feel really nice for the user at the end. As I said already, animation is a really powerful technique, but performance and functionality should be always the goal over anything else. So we should not overdo it, that's for sure. And finally, don't forget to stay active, because this is something that a lot of people are missing, and that's the active state of buttons. This is probably the easiest thing we can do for providing immediate feedback, visual feedback for our users. But again, something that we should be careful, avoid using active state with transition, because then we're manually slowing down the whole process of providing immediate feedback and visual feedback for our users. So at the end, we should be smart about perceived performance. There are a lot of things we can do there, but we should do it, we should execute it carefully, and this should be part of our brand strategy. It's something that definitely we should care as a whole, as a company, everyone in the company, I mean, and not only developers, not only from technical perspective. The goal, of course, is to make our websites feel fast, because that's what really matters at the end. And we should care more about our users, because it's all about them. Thank you. And you can find the slides on this thing as well.
Questions? Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
So, if you now are a developer and you made your app faster, so now your manager comes and asks how much faster it is. So, what, in your experience, are good metrics to measure and monitor perceived performance?
Yeah, as I mentioned at the beginning, perceived performance is the subjective part of time. So for that, it's more about how our application feels at the end. And there's some technical aspects that how we can measure that, like time to interact, first contentful part, first meaningful part, or above default. So we can see what's the minimum information that we can serve to our users at the end. And probably that's the way how you can think about approaching perceived performance. Purely from web performance perspective, of course, page load time, how speed our website loads, how we're serving the resources, that's the technicality behind this. But as a metric, I believe what I showed with the time duration and the perceived duration, I mean, these 0.1, 0.2 millisecond, 0.1 second, this feels like an instant action. So definitely the goal should be there to provide this feedback for our users in this amount of time. And this is only about the actions, right? It's about clicking, for example, a button. You should receive immediate action. We can do that with the active state. But for example, for more complex things like we have a form and we want to validate that form and after that submit that form, probably we can still do some validation and provide the error message or anything in that context, again, in that time frame. But I believe we should still keep it between 0.1 and 1 second, because that's the meaningful time we can achieve. Over 1 second, people will lose any, they will be distracted already by this immediate action that they can expect from their input. So yeah, that's my advice, how fast we can do it.
So I'm thinking about it. Yeah, I understand 1 second, 2 seconds, and I think my manager will understand it too. But he needs some metric he understands, so which he can easily understand. Like something like, well, maybe render style, he's a bit technical, or DOM interactive, or things like this. What do you think about standard metrics?
Yeah, absolutely. Even from a technical perspective, we can always attach some event listeners, and just for the purposes of track the time when there is a certain action from the user, and then how fast we are responding to that action. So we can do that, of course, but this should be additional work to what we can do. I believe it's all about the overall look of our certain element on the website or part of the application that we can focus and demonstrate in front of our managers. And we can do a comparison, because visually we should do it way better in terms of perceived performance. And this is about the just noticeable difference. So if we achieve something around 30% better for this action, this particular action, that we then present in front of our managers as a comparison, like before and after, that will be the indication that we're doing a great job. And this will be how we can provide this argument in front of them, like why we should do it. Yeah. Yeah.
I might go back to the question if the application can be too fast. I remember somebody, I don't remember who it was, told about that it was a financial calculation, and they could have done it, calculated immediately and show the user the result. The users wanted to trust, because it's about money. It should be a complicated calculation. So they had to introduce an artificial delay. I don't know how much it was, 1 second, 2 seconds, and show the result later in order to get more trust from the users.
Yeah, that's a good example as well.
Okay. Saving options, because the user feels if you save like a Google Docs document, it needs time to save it. While opening the website doesn't necessarily need time, because if the user perspective doesn't really have to show something.
Yeah.
I think there also you can be like immediate, but they can see the thing.
So I guess it depends on the context at the end as well. Yeah. Other questions?
Cool. Well,
Yeah.
Have you ever done anything like an animation audit of an existing application or a website to say these are the things that we need to fix first? And how did you arrive at this, which identifying areas to work on?
Definitely, this correlates to how important are certain elements on our website or our web application. And most of the time, this depends on the goals from the marketing team or the business owners. But when I'm doing an audit, definitely I can just scan the whole page, the web page, and I can see where we can improve in terms of perceived performance. But before that, definitely I will check the technical aspect of the actual web performance. So how fast I'm loading the content, and that I'm sure that I did all the checks for the web performance, and then go to the animations and improve the perceived performance. Yeah.
You have a favorite easing function?
Easing function?
Yeah, I remember I read something a while ago, which I think it was like the material design one, and they were like, oh yeah, use 300 milliseconds, ease out. I was just wondering if you have that. I used out some stop action and I was like, oh, it's,
Yeah, I'm not sure that I have that I have a favorite animation effect. I mean, again, depends.
You know, the seed speed, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. You can. There are certain tools that goes above the just using ease in and ease out. We can also use cubic bizarre, I believe, was the proper pronunciation. So we can achieve great results with that. So, and there are certain online tools that can help us manipulate all the arguments for this cubic bizarre animation. Yeah.
Go check some talk for well head.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right, the way creating stuff with overshoots and
Yeah.
the animation is not correct there, but
Yeah, that would be good, I think.
Yeah, she's great, and she's a specialist, and she focused actually her studies exactly on user interface animations. So definitely check her work. There are a lot of great examples there. Yeah.